back to another episode of Inside Access Control sponsored by SIA. I'm very excited today to have Sal D'Agostino join me. He's the CEO at ID Machines and also the co-founder of Open Consent. Somebody who I've respected since I've been in the business and we've known each other, and I've seen online and does a lot of writing and deep thinking. So I really appreciate you, Sal, taking the time to come on and have what I believe will be a wide range of topics focused around ID and on open standards and things like that. So welcome.
Yeah, so thanks, Lee. Really happy to be here. Love what you're doing and thrilled to have an opportunity to participate.
No problem. Thank you. So why don't we kick it off for those that don't know you? Could you just give a little background of who you are, the companies, and what you work on?
Sure. Well, I mean, I guess I'm a serial entrepreneur. I've been involved with starting technology companies for almost 40 years. Going from going back in the early 80s, I was involved with a startup that was called Computer Recognition Systems, which is one of the early machine vision companies that are out there. It's actually a spin-off of the Cognitive System Laboratory at Thorn EMI in the UK, where they had a couple of reasonable imaging technologies like the X-ray and the CAT scan came out of there. And they had a machine vision, or what most people today call video analytics group, that was working on computer vision and automating those processes. It was a venture-funded thing. I basically ran the U.S. operations. It was a job that I got fairly early out of college. There was another startup that I was involved with before that, was sort of in the robotics space. And I spent 18 years there. And we did back then it was hard, right? Back then we had to literally build the image processing hardware board by board. But we did a lot of innovative stuff. I mean, I think we rightfully claimed to having built the world's first commercial license plate reading system that we put in a tunnel in London. It was a van full of equipment. There was a PDP-8, and it could actually read license plates in real time and check them against a watch list and send the information to a police car up the road. And that led to a lot of machine vision, both in sort of the industrial space and also in the security space. And a lot of the work that I did there around using technology for manufacturing quality control actually has sort of set up this whole path after that in sort of the security world, where quality is very much like security. You have a process and you try to find what's bad while not impeding the flow of the good, right? And there's always been this knob, so that if you turned up quality too much, then you didn't meet your production requirements. And sort of the same thing applies in the security world. So even though I started off with reading license plates and measuring the lengths of McDonald's French fries, when it came around to doing access control, it was kind of the same thing. And I didn't get into the access control stuff in the traditional sense right away. We did a lot of transportation related things, and one of the things that we did was to be involved with basically the enforcement systems for a lot of the early electronic toll collection systems, probably about 25 years ago, I guess at this point. But if you think about it, a toll booth is really a very sophisticated access control system, right? So you've got an ID in your transponder, you go through, there's a classification. If you try to go through the door without a card, you took a picture, you had an alarm, there was an enforcement, there's a back end that had the audit. So those systems then sort of were then tied on to actual access control systems, and it was some work that we did around the U.S. Capitol. For vehicle screening after the Oklahoma City bombing, and people wanted to know if there's a 500 pounds of fertilizer in the trunk of the thing. And so that's when I first actually came into direct interaction with access control systems. And then after computer recognition systems, then I got involved with this company, Core Street, which a few people know, and we did a lot of interesting stuff, and that was more in the identity space, and that was a lot more digital stuff. And then after Core Street, there's ID Machines, which has been involved with now, I think we're about 12 years old, which is great. we started out doing consulting for all sorts of folks. A lot of it initially from work we did at Core Street around FIPS 201 and digital certificates, but then also just beginning to look at how to develop tools that use standards-based approaches to do security-related things. And because some of the stuff that we did at Core Street and digital certificates and FIPS 201 was around standards, and it was something that really sort of resonated about the right way to do security. And and what's fallen out of that at ID Machines is this product that we have that's called IDOLA, which is this lifecycle configuration management tool that uses standards both on the network side and on the physical security side. On the physical security side, a lot of that's around the OSDP standard, and then the work at Open Consent's also around international standards around consent and notice. So so a lot of automation, a lot of machine learning, AI now. It's fun reading books that refer to the earlier work that we did as old-fashioned AI, which it is, right? Because then you had to like sort of tell the machine, try to be deterministic. Now you've got machine learning, which is fascinating in terms of how it works, and also kind of wildly scary because you're just sort of turning it over to the board. But it's a very powerful technique that works quite well. And standards can apply even there, right? Around how do you develop codes for the ethics and addressing bias, and how do you develop standards for the data sets and other things. So that's a lot for the background, but that's why I've got this gray hair.
That's totally, that's why I wanted to have you on here. So I'm thrilled you did it. So no need to apologize on that end. I guess so. Talk to me about recently. We've seen the introduction of the OSDP standards that I know you're intimately involved in, and there's been well received, as well as there's been some questions and people trying to, I think, digest and understand it. So if you don't mind, can you share a little bit about what it is and why it's important and benefits of it?
Yeah, so so first of all, I have to give credit to the people that were early on. So it was sort of a HID, Linnell, and Mercury. Early on, we're looking to develop a standard that basically provided some interoperability between card readers and door controllers. And and the effort, I think, is it's over 10 years old. And that was the thought, because a lot of people had, well, there's a few things. Wiegand as a protocol, which I think everybody at this point in time realizes is a one direction, not secure. It had gotten a little long in the tooth, 10 years ago. Still a little long in the tooth, even though 80% of access control systems still use that technology. But there's real motivation to put something in place which did a better job than Wiegand, which isn't hard to do. So the thing that isn't hard to do is for it to be secure, and two, for it to actually be Wiegand isn't even actually a protocol, it's just sort of a one-way message. So to have something that's bi-directional means that you can actually manage devices at the edge. So, I mean, that's the real goal of the OSDP standard. And the cool thing is that it's gone from a small industry group of people to being picked up by the Security Industry Association, and Joe Giddens, who's the chair of the director of CIA standards, and the rest of the people who worked on the OSDP work group, have brought that to the point now where we believe there's in excess of 70 companies around the world that say they do OSDP. That in and of itself is a little tricky, because saying you do a standard, then adhering to the technical standard, particularly as a standard evolves, is one of the challenges that's associated with it. But the fact is that it's a better way to communicate and do card reader to door controller communication than the bulk of the systems that are out there today. And so so that's what the standard's there for. And the cool thing about it is that SIA took it on and did it as a real standard. So rather, they took it, SIA is an accredited ANSI, so American National Standards Institute Standards Development Organization. So they're an accredited ANSI SDO. And that allows them to push it to the international organization, which controls standards in this realm, which is the International Electrotechnical Commission, which is based in Switzerland. So OSDP just recently became IEC 6083911-5. It's that, but as an example, ONVIF is in that same electronic access control categories, and it's 6083911 I think 31 and 32.
Wow,
as an
I'm
example.
impressed that you know that off the top of your head, by the way.
I can spew standards numbers till the cows come home. I mean, part of the reason is that, SIA is investing in taking it forward, and ID Machines is partnering with SIA in doing that. We've been doing OSDP Bootcamps to help educate people about it, even recently gone virtual with those. So we've got training pods that we can ship to people, and we can do remote hands-on stuff. And then there's also OSDP Verified, which is the actual verification that devices, and you're either a peripheral device, which is like a door reader, or an ACU, which is a door controller, typically. And you can be verified to adhere to the profile. So to really get plug and play with a standard, you have to make sure that people adhere technically to the profile. So OSDP Verified does that, and ID Machines is one of the initial test laboratories to be able to do that. Matter of fact, we've just finished the certification of the first 2 devices, right behind me right here. And so, a reader or a PD comes in. There's a series of like 98 tests in that case for the secure profile that you can go through, put it on a test bench, use a standard set of tools that we've developed, basically making sure that the standard command gets the standard response, and that the standard communication settings are followed, and that things are done properly. And the result of that will be a listing on a SIA website, and the ability to actually use OSDP Verified as a mark.
No, and I like that, and I think that's when it's that's the understanding of the verification side of it, that I think sometimes people get confused of why you would do that, but understood on that end. I guess question for you on it though, everyone that you talk to, you're like, hey, standards are, and theoretically they're good, they understand it, right? Especially on OSDP versus Wiegand, where just the way it's done from the security side. I don't know of anybody that would be like, no, it's not as secure, right? I think people recognize there's security, and then there's also, I think long term, a lot of times the standards could help drive down costs, and it makes systems simpler. There's a whole lot of things of why you would do it, but our industry seems to be slow to adopt a lot of these standards, and then we also seem to gravitate towards older technology. Like everyone knows procs isn't necessarily the most secure thing, but yet still it dominates, right? So what do you think it's going to take for this standard to actually get the adoption that I think a lot of us hope that it would? And then actually when you talk to people outside our industry, they're actually shocked that we don't have something like this already, right? And so
sure.
How do you see our industry starting to match the expectations that people have external to us, but then also for the people that want to see this thing just get wings and go? What do you think it's going to take?
Well, I think some of those things are already in place. So what it takes is wide adoption, right? And I think you've got that at this point. You've got most of the major reader vendors, most of the reader controller manufacturers support OSDP, right? So I think that's a first hurdle. The second is that it needs to be cost effective, and this protocol itself was designed to deal with the reality of the fact that people are not going to build the most expensive reader with a massive processor and an IP stack in it. So you've got constrained devices that are going to use serial communications. So the protocol itself needed to not have a high cost from a hardware or a development perspective to be implemented. The other thing that was done, and credit to SIA, was the development of the open source to support this. So there's literally the open source that's sitting on a GitHub site that you can take, and it does almost all the work for you. All right, so I think that that combination of things is that getting manufacturers behind it, having it be cost effective, having tools that make it easy from a developer perspective. Then it's an education process, right? So then you've got to get the people who have been sending around the same CSI Section 28 architect engineering spec that's got Wiegand and 125 kilohertz in it, to say, use OSDP. And I don't think that's the hardest thing in the world, but people, you do need to get people to know that there's a better thing out there. And
well, habits are hard to break too.
Right.
Habits,
right. But the fact is, I'm involved with a job. I've been involved in many jobs, but there's one job right now where we're working on, where just like upgrading firmware and readers without having to go with a config card to every reader, it's such a huge savings, right? So the ability to because physical access control systems last for a while, right? We know them. You get them installed, yes, and they're there for 10 years at least, yeah, right? At least. So the idea that you don't have to go send a guy in the truck with a config card when you need to do a reader upgrade is a big deal. And so having that bidirectional protocol is a real big advantage. And so the educating people about the life cycle cost of things is useful, but also a challenge for the industry, right? Because most people compete on the bid to the install and integrate, right? As an industry, people haven't sold maintenance. That's a little different now as you begin to get in cloud and security and other things as a service. But people are used to an upfront cost and then it running forever and thinking that maintenance isn't a thing. But in the IoT world or in a modern computer world, your stuff updates, right? You've got to maintain stuff. There are bugs that exist, and there are vulnerabilities that exist in this stuff too. So the idea that you've got something that has a lower life cycle cost or lower long-term maintenance cost is actually a very big deal. But it's not necessarily, but jobs are often won based on the bid price to install the thing. And so having end users have an understanding, and maybe the way systems are evaluated is another challenge, Lee, that that is a little bit of a difference between the way the industry works today.
Yeah, but I guess also too, I feel like if you look at a lot of the products that come out to the market, especially new ones, but then also the legacy that are in there, is that there's a very large install base already, especially now when you see there's a crisis and you may see new construction slow down, but there's a retrofit that I feel like a lot of times when people come out with new products, they look at the existing market and they build things for Wiegand and then they move to something like OSDP versus being able to figure out how to get the systems to work with the existing. Now, I know there's like converters that people make and there's ways to do it and that, but I just, I feel like there sometimes just needs to be the will to want to do it in some cases.
It's basically the understanding. I mean, you don't need much will, right? Like the devices that I'm working on behind me that I've certified, they'll all do Wiegand. They've all, the connectors on all these things have got the 6 Wiegand wires that are coming out of it. You just, instead, all that you need to do instead is just use the 4 OSDP wires, right? It's literally that, it's literally just simply teaching the guy not to go and use those 6 wires and to use these 4 different ones. It's the readers, the way the readers are being built by most manufacturers today, and most of the controller manufacturers, if you look at them, and I've got 10 different readers behind me and 6 different door controllers that I'm playing with right now. All of them support OSDP, all of them support Wiegand. It's just a question of understanding how to configure them. And people haven't gone through that exercise before.
Some of this comes down to the awareness, understanding. So on that note, because people do habitual type things, on that note, where do people go to find more information and want to learn more about this? Where's the best place to do that?
Well, I mean, I mean, the easiest thing is to get involved with the OSDP committee at SIA, right? So there's, you don't even have to be a SIA member. So one of the things about if you do standards properly is that there's no financial constraint to participation in the standards development. So the standards committees at SIA are open to anyone, right? And so getting involved with the committee is the best way to understand what's going on. If you really want to get into the technical aspects of it, going to the GitHub site. So if you did SIA OSDP Git and a GitHub search, then you're going to see the code. We produced a bunch of videos recently under the OSDP Bootcamp section of the SIA website. There's 3 20-minute videos that we did, which are, I think, really pretty good content about this, and probably cover a lot of what I've said here. And I think I said, Rodney Thayer, who's been intimately involved with a lot of the stuff in this, and I put those webcasts together with SIA sponsorship. So so that's a really good place to go. The standard itself, obviously, is an important source of information. And we're going to continue to develop materials for the architect engineer community, for and the OSDP verified test stuff itself, right? So even if you choose not to do the verification, understanding of how it is that you would be tested, I think would be important as well. I mean, so I think SIA really is the source of stuff for OSDP. I mean, there are companies like ID Machines. I mean, everybody now seems to have their own OSDP thing going, right? So you can see, you can go to Cypress website and get OSDP information. There's HIDs pumping OSDP. Genetech has guys doing why not vegan OSDP all the time. I mean, everybody in the industry is kind of on the OSDP train. So I don't think there's any shortage of information about it. But I think SIA, the committee, the free videos that are there. But if you looked at if you did a little Google search around OSDP and presentations these days, you'd probably find 100 times more stuff than you would have 2 years ago.
Well, that's good. And if somebody wants to find out more about ID Machines and Open Consent and where do they go to do that?
Yeah, idmachines.com, openconsent.com. Open Consent's
Easy enough.
Open Consent's a little bit more in stealth these days, coming out of stealth shortly. I could quote you another, the ISO 29184 is the open consent related standard. For me, it was kind of cool. So literally working for 10 years on consent standards and the OSDP standard. Standards do not happen overnight. And so for people that say, oh, why didn't you make this thing, XYZ? It's because you start down a path and you've got to finish what you started. So standards are tricky things to do and they take a very long time. But for me, what was quite cool is that this IEC standard for OSDP and an ISO standard around consent and privacy notices and receipts both popped out of the standards process like the 1st of June, roughly. One was the end of May and the other is the first week of June. So like in a 2-week period of time, 2 standards that I've been pushing to get out there for literally a decade, both finally, it makes an elephant's gestation period look short.
Well, maybe what we'll do is have you come back on. We can get into the open consent side because I know that's an interesting conversation as well. So I'd love to do that.
Yeah, the idea of consented surveillance, right? And
very topical.
Absolutely. I mean, doing a lot of, as someone who installed a facial recognition system in Heathrow Airport in 1986, and it's been putting, and with computer recognition systems, reading people's license plates, we knew if you don't give people notice about surveillance, interesting things can happen. And so, and I think a pendulum has swung from maybe from 9/11 to, the Black Lives Matter or wherever we are in George Floyd world, COVID world, surveillance, capitalism, Shoshana Zuboff today. You know, there's a, you know, that pen, you know, nothing stays, you know, still. And so you know, so there's some interesting things around how to do surveillance in the world today. And as someone who's been doing it for a long time, trying to provide some innovation around that's a fun challenge, and, you know, hopefully some things to show there in the very near future.
Absolutely. And so we'll set that up. So Sal, thank you very much for taking the time. I always enjoy talking to you. You got a ton of knowledge and and I appreciate the energy that you put behind the standard side too, because that's sometimes I'm sure it's one of those things that unless you really, 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 really like it, it can seem sometimes as, like you said, pushing spaghetti up a hill,
Yeah.
or elephant digest. So yeah, I'm with you. So thank you. I really appreciate you taking the time to share a bit about it. And I look forward to catching up with you again.
No, I really appreciate it as well, Lee. Thanks. And, you know, everybody stay safe, and, you know, standard approaches that everybody follow, which are best practices, will get us all through a lot of things, including the current situation. So,
Well said.
yeah, yeah. So, yeah, everybody be well. And thanks again for the opportunity, Lee.
Thank you.